I wasn't supposed to fall in love with her. Not when she was bleeding American secrets to Beijing. Not when my entire career had been built on one unshakable principle. Country before everything. Country before comfort. Country before conscience. Country before the kind of love that makes you forget who you are. But that's exactly what happened. And now, years later, sitting in this room with nothing but ghosts and regret, I'm finally ready to tell you what I did, what I became, and why I can never go back. My name is David Mercer. For 13 years, I was a CIA field officer. And in the summer of 2017, in the humid, neon-soaked streets of Hong Kong, I committed treason. Not for money, not for ideology, but for a woman whose eyes held more truth than any intelligence report I'd ever read. Let me take you back to where it began. Not to Hong Kong, not yet, but to a cold morning in Virginia 20 years ago, when I first walked through the gates of Camp Peary, the farm, as we called it. I was 23 years old, fresh out of Georgetown, with a degree in East Asian Studies and a burning certainty that I was meant to serve something larger than myself. My father had been Army, his father before him Navy. Service was in our blood like iron, and when the agency recruited me, it felt like destiny clicking into place. They broke us down that first year. Stripped away everything soft, everything personal, everything that might make us hesitate when the moment came. We learned surveillance, counter-surveillance, dead drops, brush passes, how to build a cover identity so convincing you'd almost believe it yourself. We learned Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian. We learned how to read a room in 3 seconds, how to identify an asset, how to turn an enemy into an ally with nothing but words and time. But most importantly, we learned loyalty. Absolute, unquestioning loyalty to the mission, to the agency, to America. I excelled. I won't pretend otherwise. Languages came naturally to me, and I had a talent for reading people, for seeing the hairline fractures in their armor, the vulnerabilities they tried to hide. By my 3rd year in the field, I was running assets in Shanghai, then Beijing, then across Southeast Asia. I believed in what we were doing. The intelligence we gathered saved lives, stopped terrorist attacks, prevented wars before they could begin. Every stolen document, every turned informant, every secret extracted in a quiet cafe was a small victory for the side I believed was right. And then they sent me to Hong Kong. The year was 2017. The city was tense. Caught between two worlds. British colonial elegance fading into Chinese sovereignty. Democracy protests simmering beneath the surface like a pot about to boil over. Article 23 debates were heating up. Beijing was tightening its grip. And intelligence operations on both sides were reaching a fever pitch. My mission was straightforward, at least on paper. For 8 months, someone had been feeding classified Western intelligence directly to China's Ministry of State Security. The leaks were surgical, specific diplomatic cables, CIA asset lists, NSA intercept protocols. Whoever it was had deep access and knew exactly what to steal. 3 of our assets in mainland China had already gone dark. We suspected they were dead, and the mole was still operating somewhere in Hong Kong. I arrived in August during the worst of the summer heat. The air felt like breathing through wet cloth. I took an apartment in mid-levels, established my cover as a trade consultant for an American firm, and began the slow, methodical work of narrowing down suspects. The agency had given me a list of 17 possibles. Chinese nationals with access to Western networks, diplomatic staff, corporate liaisons, academics. My job was to observe, to infiltrate their circles, to find the crack that would reveal the truth. That's when I first saw her Daciao. Leon, the name still catches in my throat like glass. She was at a reception at the American Chamber of Commerce, standing near the windows overlooking Victoria Harbor. The city lights reflected in the glass behind her, and for a moment she seemed suspended between two worlds, present but distant, smiling but unreachable. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry except small jade earrings. Her hair was pulled back, emphasizing the elegant line of her neck. She was speaking with a British banker, laughing politely at something he'd said, but her eyes kept drifting toward the door, as if she were waiting for someone who would never arrive. I watched her for 15 minutes before I approached. This was part of my job: observation, pattern recognition, timing. But there was something else, something I didn't recognize then. A pull. A sense that crossing that room toward her was crossing a border I wouldn't be able to uncross. "You look like you're planning an escape," I said in Cantonese when I reached her side. She turned, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw surprise flicker across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by a careful smile. "Doesn't everyone at these things?" She replied in perfect English, with just the faintest British accent. "I'm Leon." "David," I said. "American, obviously." "Obviously," she agreed, and there was the smallest hint of amusement in her eyes. "Trade consultant, if I had to guess. Or something similar that requires you to attend tedious networking events." "Guilty," I said. "And you?" "Cultural liaison for a Hong Kong Arts Foundation," she said smoothly, which is a polite way of saying I convince wealthy people to donate money to causes they'll forget about by morning. We talked for 20 minutes. Surface conversation, the kind that reveals nothing and everything at once. She was educated at Cambridge, had lived in London for 6 years before returning to Hong Kong. She loved classical music, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had a dry wit that caught me off guard. When the reception ended and we parted ways, I had her business card in my pocket and a strange sensation in my chest that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. 2 days later, I discovered she was on my list. Zhao Lian, Chinese national. Cambridge education funded by a grant we suspected had MS connections. Cultural foundation with ties to mainland officials. Frequent travel to Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen. Access to diplomatic circles, corporate networks, academic conferences. She had motive, means, and opportunity. On paper, she was a perfect candidate. I should have reported it immediately. Should have handed her off to another officer and maintained my distance. But I didn't. Instead, I told myself I needed to get closer, to confirm before raising flags. I told myself this was operational necessity, not personal choice. I started seeing her at events, engineered casual encounters, built what the agency would call rapport. We'd have coffee in Central, walk through the markets in Shunwan, meet for dim sum in Jordan. She was careful, always proper, never revealing more than the situation required. But slowly, incrementally, she began to trust me. Or I thought she did. Looking back now, I wonder if she knew from the beginning what I was. If every coffee, every conversation, every carefully casual question I asked was as transparent to her as glass. Spies spend so much time pretending to be normal that sometimes we forget we're not very good at it. We carry our suspicion like a scent dot. It was October when things changed. The protests had intensified, and the city felt like a wire pulled too tight. I'd been following Leon's movements for 6 weeks, tracking her meetings, monitoring her communications. And then one night, I saw her leave her apartment at 2 a.m. and take a taxi to Simshuo Sui. I followed at a distance, every instinct screaming that this was it, the confirmation I'd been waiting for. She got out near the waterfront, walked along the promenade, and sat on a bench facing the harbor. She stayed there for 40 minutes, alone, watching the lights shimmer on the black water. She never met anyone, never made a call, never passed anything or received anything. She just sat there, perfectly still, like someone saying goodbye to something she could never get back. I watched from the shadows near the cultural center, and for the first time in my career, I felt like I was invading something sacred. This wasn't surveillance anymore. This was voyeurism. I was watching a woman's private grief, and I had no right to it. When she finally stood and hailed a taxi home, I didn't follow. I walked along the waterfront for hours instead, trying to understand what I'd just witnessed, trying to understand why it mattered. The next day, I received word that another asset had disappeared in Shanghai. A good man, someone I'd recruited myself 3 years earlier. His wife and daughter would never know what happened to him. The agency would list him as missing, presumed compromised. And somewhere in Beijing, they were probably celebrating another successful catch. The anger I felt was cold and clarifying. This was why I did what I did. This was why personal feelings couldn't matter. Someone was feeding our people to the wolves, and it was my job to stop them. I arranged to meet Leon that evening, told her I needed advice on a business matter, kept it casual. We met at a small restaurant in Shanghai, tucked away from the main streets. The kind of place where conversations disappeared into the ambient noise. She arrived exactly on time, as always. Ordered tea, made pleasant conversation about her day. And I watched her with new eyes, looking for tells, for cracks, for anything that would confirm what I already suspected. "You seem distracted," she said after our food arrived. "Is everything all right?" "Just work stress," I said. "The political situation here is making everything complicated." "It's making everything complicated for everyone," she said quietly. She set down her chopsticks and looked at me directly. "May I ask you something, David? And will you give me an honest answer?" My pulse quickened. This was it. "Of course. Why did you really come to Hong Kong? And please don't tell me it's about trade consulting." The restaurant suddenly felt very small, very quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "What makes you think it's not?" I asked carefully. She smiled, but it was sad. "Because I've met enough trade consultants to know what they look like. And you don't look like them. You look like someone carrying weight that doesn't show on any scales. You look like someone who's always watching, always calculating. You look like someone who can never fully relax because there's always a mission running in the back of your mind." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. She just described exactly what I was, with a precision that should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else. Recognition. The strange relief of being seen. "And what about you?" I asked quietly. "Are you what you appear to be?" "No one is," she said. "We're all playing roles, aren't we? Trying to be what others need us to be. Trying to survive in a world that demands we choose sides, even when both sides are wrong." We sat in silence after that, the unspoken truth hanging between us like smoke. I should have pressed her, should have pushed for confirmation, but I didn't. Instead, I paid the bill and walked her home through the narrow streets of Shanghai. And when we reached her building, she turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "Be careful, David," she said softly. "Hong Kong isn't what it used to be. It's becoming dangerous to trust anyone, including you." I asked. She held my gaze for a long moment. "Especially me." Then she went inside, and I stood on the street for a long time afterward, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to understand why I felt like I'd just been given a warning instead of a confession. The next 3 weeks were a kind of agony. I continued my surveillance, filed my reports, maintained my cover. But every interaction with Leon felt different now, charged. We were circling each other like fighters, each knowing the other wasn't what they claimed, each waiting for the other to make the first move. The agency was getting impatient. They wanted results. The leaks were continuing, and they needed the source identified and neutralized. My handler suggested we might need to bring in a technical team, bug her apartment, her office, her phone. Standard procedure, but I kept delaying. Kept telling them I was close, that I just needed more time. Kept finding reasons to wait. I think I knew, even then, what I was doing. I was trying to protect her, trying to give her a chance to stop, to disappear, to somehow escape the trap that was closing around her. It was already a betrayal. Small, maybe. Insignificant in the grand scheme. But it was there. Like the first crack in a dam. The night everything changed was November 17th. I remember the date because it was the anniversary of my father's death. And I'd been thinking about him all day. About duty. About sacrifice. About the choices men make when they believe in something larger than themselves. Leon called me around midnight. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath. Can you come? Now? I need to see you. I was at her apartment in 15 minutes. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater. No makeup. Hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger than I'd ever seen her. More vulnerable. And absolutely terrified. Come in, she said. Please. Her apartment was small, but elegantly furnished. Books everywhere. Classical music playing softly in the background. The windows overlooked the harbor, the city lights creating constellations in the darkness. She poured us both tea with shaking hands. I need to tell you something, she said. And after I do, you'll probably hate me. You'll probably never want to see me again. But I need you to understand why. I waited. Every instinct I had was screaming warnings, but I stayed silent. I'm the one you're looking for, she said quietly. The person who's been passing intelligence to Beijing. It's me. It's always been me. The words hung in the air between us. I should have felt vindication, satisfaction, the clean certainty of a mission completed. Instead, I felt something breaking inside my chest. Why? I managed to ask. She turned away, looking out at the city. 2 years ago, my brother was arrested in Shanghai. He's a journalist. Was a journalist. He wrote articles critical of the government, about corruption, about human rights abuses. Nothing radical, nothing violent. Just the truth. They gave him 15 years. Her voice cracked. 15 years in a labor camp for telling the truth. She wiped her eyes quickly, angry at the tears. They came to me 6 months later. MSS. They said they could help him. Get his sentence reduced. Maybe even get him released. All I had to do was provide them with information. Small things at first. Publicly available reports. Analysis. Nothing classified. And I told myself it was okay, that I wasn't really betraying anyone, that I was just trying to save my brother's life. But it didn't stay small, I said. No, she whispered. It never does. They wanted more. Always more. And every time I said no, they'd send me a photo of my brother. Thinner, sicker, bruised. They didn't have to say anything. The message was clear. Keep cooperating or he dies. She turned back to face me, and I saw everything in her eyes. The guilt. The shame. The desperate, exhausted hope that I might understand. I'm not a spy, David. I'm not ideological. I don't hate America. I don't love the CCP. I'm just a sister trying to keep her brother alive. And I'm so tired. So fucking tired of carrying this alone. I stood there in her apartment, listening to the city breathe outside the windows, and I felt my entire world tilting on its axis. Everything I'd believed about right and wrong, about loyalty and duty, about the clean moral lines we draw in the sand, all of it was dissolving like salt in water. There's something else, she said, and her voice was barely audible. I think they know you're CIA, my handlers. They've been asking about you. About us. I've been stalling, telling them you're just someone I know socially. But they're suspicious. They want me to get closer to you, to see what I can extract. Are you? I asked. Getting closer to extract information? She looked at me with such raw honesty that it hurt. At first, maybe. Maybe that's how it started. But then I actually got to know you, and everything became complicated. Because you're not what I expected. You're not what they told me CIA officers would be. You're kind. You're thoughtful. You actually listen when people talk. And somewhere along the way, this stopped being a mission and became something else. What? I asked, even though I already knew. Something real, she said. Something that scares me more than anything Beijing could threaten me with. I should have arrested her right then. Should have made the call, brought in the team, let the system handle it. She'd confessed. She'd given me everything I needed. The mission was over. But I did in single quotes T. Instead. I crossed the room and took her hand. How much time do we have? I asked. Before they expect another delivery? 3 days. Maybe 4. And your brother? Where is he exactly? Shanghai province labor camp. Middle of nowhere. Might as well be the moon. I was quiet for a long time, my mind working through scenarios, possibilities, impossible plans. If you run, they'll kill him. I know. If I extract you, if I get you to America, they'll kill him. I know. And if you stay, this will never end. They'll bleed you dry and then dispose of you when you're no longer useful. I know that too. I looked at her then, really looked at her. This woman who'd been carrying an impossible weight alone for 2 years. This woman who'd committed treason not out of greed or ideology, but out of love. This woman who'd just trusted me with her life, even knowing what I was. And I realized something that should have terrified me. I would do anything to save her. Anything. I need 48 hours, I said. For what? To figure out a way to get you both out. You and your brother. She stared at me. David, that's impossible. You can't. Maybe, I said. Probably. But let me try. Will you give me 48 hours? She nodded slowly, and I saw hope flicker in her eyes for the first time. Dangerous, fragile hope. I left her apartment at 2 in the morning and walked through the humid Hong Kong night, my mind racing. What I was contemplating wasn't just career ending. It was treason. I'd be helping a known intelligence asset escape, protecting her from American justice, and potentially compromising ongoing operations. But every time I tried to talk myself back to duty, I'd remember her face. The exhaustion, the guilt, the desperate love for a brother she'd never stopped trying to save. And I'd remember something else. All those years of training, of loyalty, of unquestioning service. All those speeches about protecting the innocent and standing up for what's right. Wasn't that what this was? Protecting someone who'd been forced into an impossible situation? Standing up against a system that treated human beings as disposable assets? Or was I just lying to myself? Dressing up betrayal in noble language because I couldn't admit the simpler truth. I was in love with her. The next 48 hours were the most intense of my life. I barely slept. I used every contact I had, every favor owed, every resource I could access without raising flags. I reached out to a former agency officer who'd gone private, who ran extractions for clients who could pay. I contacted a journalist I'd worked with in Shanghai, who had connections to underground networks that moved people across borders. I built a plan piece by piece, knowing that one wrong move would collapse the whole thing and likely get us both killed. The hardest part was the brother. Getting someone out of a labor camp in Shanghai province was nearly impossible. Those facilities were designed to be escape-proof, and the guards had orders to shoot first and document later. But I found a small window. A medical transfer scheduled for the following week. A corrupt official who could be bribed. A driver who could be replaced, not it would cost everything I had saved. It would burn every bridge I'd built in China. It would require perfect timing and tremendous luck, but it was possible. Barely. Impossibly. Possibly. On the second evening, I met with Lan in a safe location, a rented room in Mongkok. Anonymous and forgettable. I think I can get your brother out, I said, but it has to happen in 5 days, and the window is razor thin. If he's moved successfully, he'll be taken to Vietnam, then Thailand, then eventually to the U.S. He'll have to testify, cooperate fully, but he'll be alive and free. And me? She asked. You disappear. Tonight. I'll help you get out of Hong Kong before your handlers realize you're gone. You can't contact anyone, can't go back for anything. It has to be a complete ghost. And what happens to you? I'd thought about this question a lot. They'll figure it out eventually. Maybe not immediately, but they'll put the pieces together. I'll be investigated, probably arrested. Best case, I disappear into a federal prison for the rest of my life. Then we can't do this, she said immediately. I won't let you destroy yourself for me. It's already done, I said quietly. The moment I decided to help you instead of arrest you, I crossed a line. There's no going back now. I'm either all in or I'm complicit. And if I'm going to be complicit, I'd rather it be for something that matters. For someone who matters. She was crying now, silently, tears running down her face. Why? Why would you do this? I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times. And the answer was complicated. It was about duty, yes, but not the kind of duty I'd been trained for. It was about recognizing that sometimes the rules we build to protect the innocent end up crushing them instead. It was about choosing the human in front of me over the abstract idea of national security. It was about love, yes, but also about refusing to be the kind of man who could walk away from someone drowning just because saving them wasn't part of the mission parameters. Because it's the right thing to do, I said finally. And because somewhere along the way, I stopped being able to imagine a world where you weren't in it. She kissed me then, desperately, like drowning. And for those few moments, none of it mattered. Not Beijing, not Langley, not the consequences waiting in the wings. There was just her and me, and the impossible choice we'd both made. The next 5 days were a blur. I moved Lan to 3 different safe houses, using contacts from my personal network, people who owed me favors and didn't ask questions. I monitored the operation in Shanghai through encrypted channels, watching as the pieces fell into place. The bribed official, the switched driver, the medical transfer that turned into an escape. On the 4th day, I received word. The brother was out, alive, on his way to the Vietnam border, was in a safe house in Yuen Long when I got the message. Leon was asleep in the other room, exhausted from days of tension and fear. I sat in the darkness, looking at those 3 words on my encrypted phone, and felt something crack wide open in my chest. He was alive. She would be able to disappear knowing her brother was safe. The impossible thing had happened, and I had just committed the most serious crime of my career. I was staring at that message when my personal phone buzzed. My handler. Emergency protocol. Mercer. Where are you? Mid-levels, I lied smoothly. Following up on a lead? Come in, now. We need to debrief. What's the situation? The target has disappeared. Jiao Lian. She missed a scheduled contact with her handlers, and her apartment is empty. Beijing is going apeshit, and we need to coordinate before this becomes a full international incident. Get to the safe house in Central within the hour. Understood, I said. I ended the call and sat in the darkness for a long moment. This was it. The moment where everything would either work or fall apart, I went into the other room and gently woke Leon. "It's time," I said. "They know you're gone. We need to move now." She was fully alert in seconds, years of fear training her to wake ready. "Where are we going?" "Macau. I have a contact there, someone who can get you on a cargo ship to Manila. From there, you'll fly to Los Angeles under a different identity. Documents are already prepared. And my brother? He's out. He's safe. He'll be in Bangkok by tomorrow, then on a flight to Seattle. You'll be able to contact him once you're both settled, but not before. Too risky." She grabbed my hand. "Come with me, please. We'll disappear together. Go somewhere they'll never find us." God, I wanted to. In that moment, I wanted it more than I'd ever wanted anything. But I shook my head. If I run, they'll know for certain it was me. They'll dedicate unlimited resources to finding us. But if I stay, if I play confused and concerned, if I act like I was fooled along with everyone else, I can buy you time. Create confusion. Make them look in the wrong places. They'll figure it out eventually. Maybe, probably, but by then you'll be gone. Really gone. And that's what matters. We drove to Macau in a borrowed car, through the early morning hours when the border was quietest. I'd forged the crossing documents myself, old skills coming back like muscle memory. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much left to say down at the port. My contact was waiting, a former asset of mine who'd gone independent, who ran an extraction service for people who needed to disappear. He looked at Leon, then at me, and I saw understanding in his eyes. "This is going to cost you everything, you know," he said quietly. "I know." He nodded. "Get out of here before someone sees you together. I'll take it from here." I turned to Leon for the last time. Memorized her face in the pre-dawn light, the way her hair moved in the wind off the water, the set of her shoulders, the depth in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry for all of this, for what it's cost you." "Don't be," I said. "In a world full of wrong choices, you were the only right one I ever made." She kissed me once briefly, a goodbye that tasted like salt and sorrow. Then she turned and followed my contact toward the waiting ship, and I watched until she disappeared from view. I stood at that dock for a long time afterward, watching the sun come up over the water, and felt the weight of what I'd done settle into my bones. I'd betrayed my oath, betrayed my country, betrayed 13 years of service and loyalty. I'd helped an intelligence asset escape, compromised ongoing operations, and destroyed my entire career. And I'd do it again. I drove back to Hong Kong and went directly to the safe house in Central. My handler was waiting with 3 other officers I didn't recognize. The moment I walked in, I knew they suspected. The next 6 hours were interrogation, dressed up as debriefing. They asked about my relationship with Leon, about my surveillance reports, about every interaction we'd had. I stuck to my story. I'd been developing her as a potential asset, building trust, waiting for the right moment to make my pitch. Her disappearance was as much a surprise to me as to anyone. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their eyes. But they didn't have proof. Not yet. They sent me back to my apartment under informal surveillance. Told me to stay available for further questions. I knew what that meant. They were building a case, gathering evidence, waiting for me to make a mistake. I spent the next 3 days in limbo, waiting for the hammer to fall. And then, on the 4th day, I received a message through a dead drop I'd established weeks earlier. A precaution I built without fully knowing why it was from Leon. Just 3 words. "We're both safe." I burned the message immediately and felt something like peace settle over me for the first time in months. They were alive. They were safe. Whatever happened to me now didn't matter, but nothing happened. Days became weeks, weeks became months. I was kept on administrative duty, restricted to the Hong Kong station. My security clearance suspended pending review. The investigation continued, but without hard evidence. They couldn't move to formal charges. And then one day, my handler called me in and told me they were closing the case. Zhao Lian had disappeared completely. Her brother was in U.S. custody cooperating with intelligence services, and Beijing had gone quiet on the matter. As far as the agency was concerned, it was a loss, but not a catastrophic one. They'd lost the chance to flip Lian and use her as a double agent, but they'd gained her brother's testimony and intelligence on MSS operations. I was being reassigned. A desk job in Virginia. A clear message that my field career was over, but that they weren't going to destroy me completely. I accepted it without protest. I spent 3 more years with the agency, pushing papers, analyzing reports, doing the quiet bureaucratic work that keeps intelligence operations running. I never went back to the field, never ran another asset, never felt that particular thrill of being operational again, and I never heard from Lian. I told myself that was how it should be. Contact would be dangerous, foolish, potentially fatal. She'd built a new life somewhere, was hopefully finding peace. Her brother was safe, cooperating with witness protection, starting over. The story had as happy an ending as stories like ours ever get. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder where she was, what she was doing. If she ever thought about those desperate days in Hong Kong, if she remembered the way the city lights looked reflected in the harbor. If she remembered me. I left the agency 3 years ago, took early retirement, moved to a small town in Oregon where nobody knows my name or my history. I teach Mandarin at a community college. I take long walks in the rain. I read books that have nothing to do with intelligence or geopolitics. I try to build something resembling a normal life, but I'm not normal. I never will be. You can't spend 13 years living in shadows and then just step into the light as if nothing happened. You can't betray everything you once believed in and then simply move on. The guilt doesn't work that way. The weight doesn't lift. Sometimes students ask me why I left the Foreign Service, what made me give up a career in international relations for teaching. I tell them I got tired of traveling, that I wanted something quieter. They nod and accept this because they're young and they believe that wanting quiet is natural, is normal. They don't know that I wake up most nights with my heart pounding, dreaming of interrogation rooms and encrypted phones and a woman standing at a dock in Macau. They don't know that. I check my dead drops still, even though I'm no longer operational, even though no one should be contacting me. Old habits die hard. They don't know that 6 months ago, I found a package in one of those dead drops. A small envelope, no return address, postmarked from somewhere in South America. Inside was a single photograph. A woman on a beach, her back to the camera, looking out at the ocean. Dark hair moving in the wind. The photo was slightly blurred, taken from a distance, but I knew her instantly. Would have known her anywhere. On the back, in handwriting I recognized, were 5 words. Thank you for my life. I keep that photograph in a book on my shelf, pressed between pages like a dried flower. I don't look at it often. Looking at it hurts too much. But knowing it's there, knowing she's alive and safe and free, that's enough. That has to be enough. People think spies live these glamorous lives, full of danger and excitement and clear moral purpose. They think we always know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. They think we never question our orders, never doubt our missions, never feel the weight of the choices we make in the dark. But the truth is messier than that. The truth is that sometimes the person you're supposed to catch becomes the person you can't let go. Sometimes the mission becomes the obstacle. Sometimes love makes traitors of us all. I betrayed my country. There's no other way to say it. I violated my oath, compromised operations, and helped an intelligence asset escape justice. If the full truth ever came out, I'd spend the rest of my life in federal prison, and I'd deserve it, but I also saved 2 lives. 2 people who were being crushed between forces so much larger than themselves. A journalist who told the truth and his sister who loved him too much to let him die. Were they perfect? No. Was what Leon did justified? I don't know. Intelligence work exists in shades of gray that most people never have to navigate. What I do know is this. In that moment, standing in her apartment in Hong Kong, with her confession hanging in the air between us, I had a choice. I could have been a good CIA officer and arrested her, followed protocol, done my duty, and she would have spent the rest of her life in prison while her brother died in a labor camp in China. Or I could have been a good human being and tried to save them both. I chose the second. And I've spent every day since living with that choice. Doc, was it worth it? I don't know. Some days I think yes, absolutely, without question. Those are the days when I remember her face in the pre-dawn light at the Macau dock. When I think about her somewhere safe, building a new life. Those are the days when the weight feels bearable. Other days, I'm not so sure. Those are the days when I think about the other assets, the ones who might have been compromised because I let Leon run, the operations that might have been jeopardized, the intelligence we lost, the damage I did to an institution. I spent 13 years serving. The truth is, I'll never know the full consequences of what I did. Intelligence work is like throwing a stone into dark water. You hear the splash, but you never see where the ripples go. But if I'm being completely honest, if I'm stripping away all the justifications and rationalizations and moral complexity, I didn't let her go because of some high-minded ethical stance. I didn't help her escape because I'd suddenly realized the CIA was wrong and she was right. I didn't commit treason for philosophy or politics, or even for justice. I did it because I loved her. Because in a life built on lies and cover identities and calculated betrayals, she was the only real thing I'd found. And I couldn't let that go. Couldn't let them take her. Couldn't be the person who put duty before the one true thing I'd ever known. Maybe that makes me a traitor. Maybe it makes me weak. Maybe it makes me the worst kind of intelligence officer, the kind who puts personal feelings before national security. Or maybe it just makes me human. I think about my father sometimes, the career army man who raised me on stories of duty and honor and service. I wonder what he would think of what I did. I like to think he'd understand, but I'll never know. He died believing I was one of the good guys. And I'm glad he never had to see me become something else. But here's what I've learned in the years since Hong Kong. In the long, quiet aftermath of the most intense moment of my life, loyalty is more complicated than they teach you at the farm. It's not just about flags and agencies and national interests. It's also about the person crying in front of you. It's about recognizing that sometimes the system we serve, as noble as its intentions might be, grinds up innocent people and calls it necessary. It's about having the courage to say, not this time, not this person. Was I right? I don't know. I'll probably never know, but I made a choice. I stood at a crossroads and chose love over duty, chose the human over the mission, chose truth over loyalty. And whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, I can live with that, Dot, because here's the thing they don't tell you in intelligence training. At the end of your life, when you're looking back at the choices you made, it's not going to be the successful operations you remember. It's not going to be the commendations or the promotions or the classified victories that nobody outside the agency ever knew. About Dot, it's going to be the moments when you stood at the edge and decided who you really were. The moments when everything you believed collided with everything you felt. The moments when you had to choose between being a good officer and being a good person. And in that moment, in Leon's apartment with the city lights reflecting in her tears, I chose. I chose her. I chose love. I chose the impossible belief that sometimes, just sometimes, individual human beings matter more than the grand strategic chess game we tell ourselves we're playing. I carry that choice with me every day. In the quiet college classrooms where I teach Mandarin to students who will never know my real story. In the rainy Oregon evenings when I walk. Through forests that feel nothing like the humid streets of Hong Kong. In the early morning hours when I wake from dreams of encrypted phones and harbor lights and a woman I'll probably never see again. Carry it like a wound that never quite heals, but also like a badge I earned in the only battle that ever really mattered, the battle to stay human in a world that demanded I become something else. They say love can move mountains, but for me, it moved borders. It erased everything I once believed in, everything I'd built my life around. It took 13 years of training and loyalty and service and shattered it like glass on concrete and left me standing here. Years later, in a small town where nobody knows my name, teaching irregular Mandarin verbs to disinterested undergraduates, wondering if the woman whose life I saved ever thinks about the life I gave up to save her. I don't regret it. That's the strange thing. I should wake up every morning furious at myself for throwing away my career, my purpose, everything I'd worked for. I should resent her for putting me in that impossible position. I should curse the weakness that made me choose love over duty. But I don single quotes T. because in the end, we're all just people trying to make it through impossible situations with whatever grace we can manage. We're all just trying to protect the things we love, even when the world tells us we shouldn't, even when it costs us everything. Leon was blackmailed into betraying secrets to save her brother. I betrayed my country to save her. We're both traitors. We both crossed lines we can never uncross. We both chose love over loyalty, and maybe that's the most human thing either of us could have done. So yes, I let a Chinese informant escape. I burned my files, gave her a way out, and stayed behind to face the consequences. I committed treason not for money or ideology, but for a woman whose eyes held more truth than any intelligence report I'd ever read. Was it worth it? Ask me on good days, and I'll show you that photograph of her on the beach, alive and free, and tell you yes, absolutely. Without question. Ask me on bad days, and I'll show you the same photograph and tell you the same thing. Because worth isn't about cost-benefit analysis. It's not about strategic value or operational success. It's about standing at the edge of everything you know and choosing to jump anyway. It's about believing that some things, some people, are more important than the rules we build to protect us from having to make impossible choices. My name is David Mercer. I was a CIA field officer for 13 years. I spoke 4 languages, ran assets across East Asia, gathered intelligence that saved lives and prevented conflicts. And in the summer of 2017, in the humid streets of Hong Kong, I met a woman named Xiao Lian and learned that love doesn't care about loyalty. It doesn't care about oaths or duty or the clear moral lines. We think separate, right from wrong. Love just is, demanding, impossible, transformative. And it will make traitors of us all. I live with that now. I live with knowing I'm the kind of man who chose personal feeling over national duty. I live with knowing that somewhere in a filing cabinet at Langley, there's a file with my name on it marked possible compromise. I live with knowing I'll never be able to go back, to redeem myself, to return to the person I was before. But I also live with knowing she's safe, that she's out there somewhere, building a life, breathing free air, no longer carrying impossible weight alone. And her brother too, alive, protected, given a second chance. 2 lives. That's what my treason bought. 2 people who get to wake up tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. I tell myself that has to be enough. That has to mean something. And on the days when the weight gets too heavy, when the guilt threatens to crush me, when I can't remember why I thought any of this was a good idea, I take out that photograph. The woman on the beach, her back to the camera, looking out at infinite water. And I remember that love isn't always clean or convenient or justifiable. Sometimes it's messy and impossible and costs you everything you thought you were. But it's real. In a world built on deception and shadows and carefully constructed lies, it was the only real thing I ever found. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not for my career. Not for my reputation. Not for the clean certainty of knowing I'd done the right thing. Because I don't know if what I did was right. I probably never will. But I know it was true. And in the end, maybe that's all any of us can hope for, to find one true thing in a lifetime of lies. To hold on to it even when the world tells us to let go. To choose it even when choosing it destroys us. I chose lie on. I chose love. I chose the impossible belief that individual human beings, in all their messy complexity, matter more than the abstract principles we use to govern them. And now I live in the aftermath of that choice, quietly, carefully, in a small town where the rain falls like memory, and nobody asks questions about the past. I teach Mandarin. I grade papers. I drink coffee and watch the rain and think about harbor lights and encrypted messages and a woman whose life I saved by destroying my own. And I wait, not for anything in particular, not for redemption or forgiveness or some grand narrative resolution. Just for the next day, and the next, and the next. Carrying the weight of what I did, carrying the memory of who I was and who I became, carrying the photograph of a woman on a beach, alive and free because I learned to love something more than duty. They say spies die long before their missions end, that the person you are gets slowly erased until only the cover identity remains, that we lose ourselves in the shadows and never quite find our way back. And maybe that's true. Maybe the David Mercer, who walked through the gates of the farm 20 years ago, died somewhere in Hong Kong, replaced by this quieter version who teaches college students and walks in the rain. But if I died, at least I died for something real, for someone real. And in the dark world of intelligence work, where truth is currency and loyalty is survival, and love is the most dangerous vulnerability of all, maybe that's the only victory that matters. Maybe that's the only way any of us really survive. By choosing, just once, to be human instead of operational, to be vulnerable instead of strategic, to love instead of calculate. I don't know if I'll ever see Lion again. Probably not. Contact would be dangerous for both of us, and we both understand that. The photograph is enough. The knowledge that she's alive is enough. It has to be, because this is what treason looks like. Not a dramatic betrayal for ideology or money. Not a grand political statement. Just a man in a small town, teaching irregular verbs and living with ghosts, who once stood at a crossroads and chose love over everything else. And would do it again. Every time. Without hesitation. Because in the end, we're not defined by the oaths we take, or the agencies we serve, or the missions we complete. We're defined by the choices we make when everything we believe collides with everything we feel. And I made my choice. I let her go. I let her live, and I'd burn the world to do it again.